Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Now, everybody knows that game developers work crazy hours, right? Lots of overtime, lots of crunching, and it's just life draining. Take away all your time. If you want to be a game dev, just plan to not have a life. Well, that's certainly a big misconception, I think. It's something that a lot of people believe, and there are reasons for it. There are plenty of horror stories out there of companies just working their employees to the bone, having them going 60, 70, 80 hours a week continuously, not just for in a little emergency, but like month after month after month. But that's not really the normal. The normal situation, game development's a lot like regular development. Some people work crazy hours. Some companies have crazy hours. But overall, in general, people work pretty damn normal times. So I sent out a quick survey last week, and I just wanted to get an idea of what everybody else was seeing. See how it compared to all the game devs that I know and the other developers that I know. And here are the results. I just want to go over these really quickly. So the first question was, how much overtime do you work? And you see that overall, the most common answer is just a few hours every now and then. And I expect this in just about any coding job or software job. If something big comes up, there's some emergency, there's a patch that's having a problem, an unplanned thing, or just right at the end of a deadline, you may end up working a little bit of overtime. Maybe you're doing an extra 5 hours or 10 hours that week. Should not be a common thing though. The next biggest thing was 5 to 10 hours. Kind of funny. It's surprising to me how much of that there was. Like 23% were doing 5 hours to 10 hours every week. To be honest, I probably do more than that. I'm probably in this 11 to 12 hour option. But the next part I think is kind of the most important, which is, are you compelled by your employer to actually do this overtime work? When you're doing game development, what I've come across a lot is a lot of people who really, really love what they do. They're really excited about it, and they want to make sure that they release the best thing possible, and they just tend to overwork themselves. It's not so much a company mandated, hey, you have to come in, you need to be working 60 hours a week. It's developers who just really love their product and they can't stop working on it. And I find myself falling into that quite often. And I know a couple game developers, game designers especially, who just work insane amounts of hours, and it's just because they're too damn passionate about what they do. It's not required, it's just something they can't stop themselves from doing. But overall, the number was not bad, right? 21% said that they have some compelled overtime, which is, the company either saying, hey, we really want you to do this, or you have to do this extra time to get this thing done. Most of them only when it's an emergency, which again, I think is totally reasonable. If there's something big, some emergency coming up, you're going to have to work a little overtime. That's not game dev specific. And then, no, 40%. This should probably be a little bit higher, but it's still not bad. I think it's pretty standard. Now, I wanted to go over this next part because in here I asked what type of development you're working on. So I want to know, is there a big difference in game dev versus web stuff or business apps? And I've worked on all of these in the past, and personally, I've not seen any real difference. You have a small subset of people who work crazy amounts of time, crazy overtime. You have occasional bad managers who just aren't good at keeping track of things, aren't keeping things on track, and have, everything falls behind, and everybody has to kind of rush to fix and, recover from a giant disaster. But overall, it's really kind of similar, right? There's no difference. There was no difference in the breakdown. The percentages were all 1 or 2% off. So it was interesting for sure. And then company size also, it seemed that the smaller companies tended to have a little bit more overtime, which is to be expected. A smaller startup, it's got less people there. There aren't as many processes. They're probably not as organized, and you may end up with a little bit more overtime or more likelihood of overtime happening. That's not to say that a big company can't totally screw this up too. I've seen plenty of that where big companies they make these big plans. Nobody actually schedules or plans anything out, so they're just kind of guessing how long stuff's going to take. And then stuff falls behind. Everybody ends up working overtime, trying to kind of rush, and we fall into that emergency situation. So I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't also just talk about the concept of crunch time. So this is something that's really common in game studios, or at least, like I said, it used to be really common. It's certainly died down a lot in the last decade or so from what I've seen personally. And this is the whole idea of having a subset of time where you're getting semi-close to a deadline. Maybe it's like 2-3 months out, and everybody on the team is working overtime, just kind of chugging along, trying to get the thing done in time so they can meet that date and get it out. And personally, I fucking hate it. I think it's a terrible sign of just mismanagement and bad planning. It's a side effect of shooting for a whole lot of stuff and not doing enough in the beginning. From what I've seen, it tends to be that people don't really know what they're doing at first. They don't have a good plan. There's not a solid, lineup of, hey, these are all the things that we're going to do. These are the people that are going to do them. These are when they need to be done by. And we have time in there to test and iterate. The biggest thing that people tend to schedule out, at least managers tend to schedule out, is the extra testing and iteration time. They always, or often, come across with this idea that, hey, the first version of this, that should be the right version. It should be perfect. Everybody should love it. And we're not going to need to go back in and change things. Sometimes it's because developers say that. They say, hey, I need a month to do this, and managers believe it. Good managers should know that's probably not good. You don't want to get estimates that are out that long. They're just inaccurate. They're not very useful. And they almost never, like I said, take into account the fact that things are going to change. And this happens a lot more with games than with business apps. With business apps, it's a little bit easier to determine how the thing's going to be used, who's going to be using it, and if it's going to accomplish the job. With a game, it has to be fun. It has to feel good. And getting that feel and fun on paper and planned out is a whole lot harder. It's not so simple to say, hey, this feature is going to work just like this. It's going to feel smooth and sweet, and everybody's going to like it, and it's going to make a lot of sense. Everybody's going to know how to do it. In a business app, maybe a little bit of that, but not nearly as much as with a game. The game, you really have to get in there and you have to polish, and you have to schedule for it. You have to plan for it. The managers who don't plan for it, who don't schedule for it, or who just lie to people above them to make themselves look better tend to, force a shitload of this crunching and just overwork the employees, basically driving down their productivity, in my opinion, and driving down employee happiness, all because things aren't well planned. Of course, nobody's going to get everything right. Sometimes there are emergencies. Sometimes, you do the best planning possible and things still fall apart and everybody kind of pitches in and helps fix the problem. But if that's a common thing, if you're seeing it all the time, there's a serious problem at the place that you're at, and I just feel sorry for you. But personally, I just generally flat out refuse it. If people say, hey, we crunch every now and then for this amount of time, I say no. Like, nope. I will find my job. I'll get my tasks. I'll get them all done. I'll have them done long before then. And if you need me to go back and revisit them, fine. But I'm not going to work 80 hours a week on this project because things were just poorly managed and not planned. So overtime in general, not a terrible thing. Like I said, I work ridiculous amounts every day, probably 12 to 16 hours a day. But it's because I love what I'm doing. I have a lot of fun with it. And I also get to do things like this. But I would not do that just going in working for somebody else, at least not long term. Maybe if you're starting out, just like first job, but don't think that it's the normal and that you're expected to do it. As you can see again with the data here, it does happen. Oh wait, where was it? This one right here. But it's a small percent. And here, even this 21%, I'm sure is not just constant overtime. It's going to be some small amount of overtime, at least half the time, where it's just, hey, we have an emergency, let's get it done. Anyway, I'm going to quit rambling on about this. If you want to talk about or share your experience, the survey is down below, so you can just go in and fill in your info. But also, if you have comments about this, I'm sure that there are going to be people that think I'm insane and crazy and that crunch time's awesome and everybody does it, everybody should do it. Just respectfully disagree. But, you know, maybe you've got some other stories about it or other thoughts. And if you do, also feel free to just drop those below. Love to talk a little bit more about this. All right, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the alert button, and whatever that other list of stuff that I'm supposed to say at the end is. All right, have a great day.